All right, we're going to call our meeting to order. Tonight is January 21, 2020. This is a meeting of the Shrewsbury Conservation Commission. And our first item is to review and approve minutes. We do have a lot of minutes to approve. We've had a bit of a backlog, but we're still reviewing and making comments, so there are none to sign tonight. Second item is to sign the bills. We do have bills. It's just one. Okay, moving on to item 3, meetings and hearings. Our first hearing is a continued public hearing regarding the notice of intent filed by Route 20 Nominee Trust for the construction of 2 commercial buildings, stormwater management basins, paved parking lot area, retaining walls, and associated site work within the 100-foot buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland or bank at 180, 200, 228 Hartford Turnpike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Mark Donahue from Fletcher Tilton on behalf of the applicant. With me this evening is Roy Smith of R.J. O'Connell, the civil engineers who have designed the site, and Art Allen of Ecotech, who is our wetland consultant involved. It's been some time since we were before the commission. To refresh your recollection, the project involved is the reuse of the former Edgemere Drive-In site. It is proposed as a mixed-use site consisting of 250 rental residential units and approximately what was 145,000, now a little less, as you'll hear this evening, of a retail centered or anchored by a supermarket complex. We have since June been in the process with the planning board. We completed that process on January 9th, and the planning board approved both the special permit and site plan approval by unanimous vote that evening and filed their decision the next day with the town clerk. As we reviewed with the board on January 9th, since the last time we were here, the plan has been modified in a material fashion that's relevant to your review in that the stormwater detention system has been modified so as to essentially reduce the number of basins and therefore improve what we believe is both the aesthetic appearance and the maintenance factor for the development. And so with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'd like Mr. Smith to review those with you so you understand the nature of the changes. Just take one and pass it down. Sure.
Thanks, Mark. Good evening. My name is Roy Smith. I work for R.J. O'Connell and Associates. What is going around the table now is the previous site plan, and then on the second sheet is the currently proposed site plan. As Mark was mentioning, the changes to the development program are primarily associated with the detention basins and the numbers of detention basins. When the original submittal included 7 on-site detention basins. In the new plan, we've eliminated 3 of the basins and increased the size of what we refer to as basin number 5. And by doing the elimination of the 3 basins are located primarily along the main access drive. They were located, I should say, primarily along the main access drive. There was 3 of them located there. Obviously, from an aesthetics perspective, we wanted to redesign the site in order to eliminate those basins, but it also allowed us to decrease impervious coverage and decrease impervious coverage within the 100-foot buffer zone as well. So I think the improvements to the plan from the previous submittal package, or the original submittal package, greatly increased from a environmental and buffer zone disturbance perspective. As you can see, there was, in the originally approved submittal set, we had a 24,000 square foot one building as an out parcel. In the new, or the revised site plan, that has split down to two smaller buildings, decreasing the building footprint by about 7,500 square feet. And then therefore decreasing the parking area associated with that building by about the same, about 8,000 square feet. And that's an 8,000 square foot reduction within the 100-foot buffer zone from the originally submitted plans.
So you're talking footprint, square footage, it's not a double-story building or anything when you're talking square footage.
Yeah, it's a single-story
Single-story?
buildings, so it's a footprint reduction of 7,500,
Gotcha.
Which allowed us to reduce the parking associated with that out parcel building.
Okay.
And it allowed us, more importantly, to increase the size of Basin 5, which abuts that out parcel building. And by doing those modifications, we decreased the impervious coverage within the 100-foot buffer zone by about 8,000 square feet from the original submittal. All the stormwater management has been reviewed by Graves Engineering. We have a review letter that we have to submit final plans, and we have a planning board condition that I would assume the Conservation Commission may be willing to accept a very similar condition, that final plans based on the Graves final review letter, and I forget the date of that letter.
December 26th.
December 26th, will be submitted and made part of the record plans. The comments from Graves are very minor. They're typos, there's missing pipe size elevations and stuff like that. The methodology stays the same. We are still storing and infiltrating the 1-inch storm with the revised stormwater management design. And the water quality stays the same, peak flows are reduced, so forth and so on.
Can you walk us through, Roy,
Yeah.
each basin, just how the flow moves through and where it exits into the,
Yes, so primarily the commercial space, the supermarket and the large commercial space, and the bank out parcel and this out parcel all go to Basin 5. All right, the back side of the commercial space and some of the exterior ring roads go to Basin 4, which is behind the loading area of the supermarket. And then the eastern residential buildings and group primarily go to Basin 6. And then these upper residential buildings go to Basin 7, and some of it splits and goes to Basin 4 as well.
and the outlets from those basins, they're detention basins largely too.
Yes.
So where's the outlets
The
going?
outlets, so there's an existing, if you go, I don't have a copy of the grading and drainage plan with me, but there's an existing 24-inch drainage pipe that services Route 20, that cuts through the site. We're relocating that and not touching that drainage system, where you have to relocate that drainage pipe, but that's one of the outlets. We're not touching that system at
So the
all.
discharge point's the same, you're saying?
Yes.
But you're rerouting some of the piping, getting to that discharge?
That's correct, that's correct. However, this basin, and I think I talked about this in the original presentation, is we have 3 outlet pipes or outlet structures from Basin 5. And the reason for that is, rather than having one large outlet pipe, we rather have smaller outlet pipes and reduce the flows coming out of each outlet structure to reduce potential erosion measures at the outlet pipes. We also have riprap spillways and velocity dissipators placed at all the flayed end sections. So this basin has 3 outlets. It's compared to, there's an existing, the existing watershed heads to that same direction. And then there's another point of analysis here, and then there's another point of analysis here. So there's 3 on-site points of analysis.
You ready for questions?
Yeah?
Martha?
Would you mind refreshing my memory about how the basins actually work? I understand that they will accept runoff from the impervious surfaces. And
Yeah.
then are they specially constructed with certain soils? Are they supposed to absorb the water into the soils in the ground? Or are they going into some big tank somewhere to dissipate?
There is no underground subsurface detention or infiltration systems. The infiltration/retention basins They're all the same, so all 4 retention basins act in a very similar fashion. The first 1 inch of runoff, which is what they refer to as the first flush, is totally retained and infiltrated on site on all of the basins. So it acts so it's a staged basin. So after the first inch of rainfall, for the 2-year storm, for instance, I think the 2-year storm's like 3-point-something inches. So after the first inch of runoff, it starts acting like a retention basin. So the upper stages just retain in size to retain the runoff within the basin itself. And so it's reduced under the peak flows under the existing watershed that heads to that area. So you have, for instance, under Basin 5, we have an existing peak flow that goes to that watershed of 100 CFS. We're reducing that down to 99 CFS. And those are fictitious numbers. I could pull out the actual numbers, but we have to maintain or reduce peak flows in volumes heading from the stormwater management. And that's the Mass DEP stormwater policy, as well as the town's stormwater policy. The 1 inch is also a town's requirement and a DEP requirement, because that is what they refer to as the 1 inch is the water quality volume from a commercial site. So all the basins function very similar to that as Basin 5. So it's an infiltration basin in the first stage, and then it's more of a retention basin in the upper stages of the basin.
Okay.
And they all have outlet structures with orifices and V-notch weirs and outlet pipes with flared end sections and velocity dissipators at the outlets.
Okay, so the water's eventually going to go into Flint Pond and Lake Quincy.
Yeah, actually, before it goes, there's the bank of Flint Pond, and then coming inward towards the development site is bordering vegetated wetlands. So our discharges are all outside, obviously, the bordering vegetated wetlands. So it goes through the bordering vegetated wetlands and then eventually works its way to Flint Pond like it does under existing conditions.
So you're relying on the natural systems of the vegetation and the soils to treat any of the pollutants that are going to come in from the parking lots?
No, before discharge to the flared end sections from each basin, we're getting what they refer to as 80% total suspended solids removal. And we're doing that by what they refer to as a treatment train. We have parking lot sweeping. We're gonna be doing parking lot sweeping. We have deep hoods and sump catch basins. Then it goes to what they refer to as a hydrodynamic separator. And then it goes into the infiltration basin. And so by that treatment train, you get the 80% total suspended solids removal rate that's required from a water quality perspective.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Jason?
None right now.
Bob?
I'm looking for the details on those discharge structure, on those structures, on the outlet side. And I'm not having any success finding them. Could you tell me what sheet that is?
So the outlet structure,
On C7, you have
Yeah,
a
should
typical
be.
splash pad detail.
Yep.
But is that typical for all of your?
for all of the outlet pipes, yes.
So every one of those is the upper left-hand corner of C7?
Yeah. And the outlet structures themselves should also be detailed.
Well, it's just the outlet structure here, it's just the wing wall discharge. Did you
It's
say
on
Oh,
C7.
here it is.
detail
Oh, I see it.
9.
Okay, I
9?
see it.
Detail 9 are the outlet
Yeah,
structures.
detail 9, all right.
Oh, okay, I got it.
And you're going to have, and you're going to have 3 of these, you said, out of the main?
Out of the Basin 5, yes, we're
Out
gonna
of
have
the
3 of
so
those.
5, and only a single one out of the other basins?
Yes,
Okay.
yep.
So number 9, that is actually in the basin, that's where it overflows into it, and then from there, it goes to the wing wall discharge.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct, yep.
Now you have, you have you have an orifice elevation there halfway up that, so that it's gonna take some flow
Yep,
from the less than a 100-year storm, so to
Yes,
speak.
right, yeah.
A 100-year storm goes over the top, okay. All right.
And they're each modeled that
Yes,
way,
based
very
on the-
similar way.
that's right.
Yeah. And
Now-
it's modeled, we analyzed 3 storm events, the 2, 10, and 100-year storm.
And you may have said this, but even though you reduced the number, what happened to the total capacity of these?
We had to increase Basin 5. So
No,
the
but
capa-
in total, what, is there equal, or?
About equal, believe it or not. And the infiltration rate in Basin 5 is more favorable than some of the other basins that we eliminated.
Because of the gravel?
Because of the gravel in the location based on our soil testing.
Good. No more questions?
So it was more efficient
Yeah,
from
makes sense.
that perspective.
I'm all set.
Andy,
No, I say, Mr. Chairman, it's been pretty much thoroughly divided between Graves and engineering. It's been a long process, and I think at this point, we're pretty comfortable with it, so.
on the maintenance of the drainage structures, I know you get that 1 inch of infiltration into the basins. How do you plan to maintain that 1 inch of infiltration over the years? I know the control structures ahead of it are going to be taking 80% of the TSS out, but obviously, over time, things are going to start to plug up. Do you have a,
Yeah, as part of our stormwater management report,
Okay.
we provided a long-term pollution prevention plan.
Okay.
Where we inspect the catch basins, have to clean them when they're half full.
Yeah.
The same with the hydrodynamic water
Right.
separators and the basins themselves as well. So there's a maintenance and an inspection schedule.
so you're looking at each basin to see over time whether they're starting to plug and
Yeah.
not taking water down in that initial first flush?
Yeah, and then do any corrective measures, remove the debris, re-lumen and seed it. One thing that I should note, and I think it was a request or a comment at our initial public hearing, is that we are now seeding the bottom of the basins with a New England,
Erosion control and restoration mix for moist sites, so it's a native species mix formulated out in Amherst by New England Wetland Plants is what we specified for seeding of all the basins.
What's the long-term outcome of that? Does it just keep growing and dying each season and?
It's mostly perennial species,
Okay.
so they'll grow and they'll die back at the end of the season.
Right, and then they'll
spring-
come back.
spring, correct, yeah. And they'll maintain a turf layer, permanent root layer, and then root crop in the spring.
Is it mostly turf, or are there forbs in there too?
Oh, no, yeah, it's forbs and grasses. I just mean turf in terms of the root structure.
Okay.
It's forbs and grasses. It's a whole seed mix. It's grasses like blue stem and forbs. There's bone set in there, and there's a whole
Yeah.
spectrum.
Good pollinator plants.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
probably 20 different species. Yeah, definitely flowering pollinators too.
Okay. Are you guys all set so we can go to the public for questions now?
Just one thing I did want to point out so the commission's aware of it. The site, as you can see it there, as laid out, complies with the requirements for parking under the zoning bylaw in all fashions as found by the zoning planning board. In addition, the residential components in 2 different areas have 35 spaces, is that right, Roy?
46.
Have 46 spaces basically designed, which are not planning to be constructed, but they're designed in that all of the stormwater has been calculated as if it is going to be created. And that's really gonna be a determination that's gonna be made candidly as a marketing factor, once the apartments are occupied, figure out how many people actually need cars and what the space is. So we would contemplate, in a perfect world, that while your order of conditions is open, that determination be made, the work will be part of it. If not, then if it gets closed out with a certificate of compliance, we'll have to come back and re-permit that work, which will be in the buffer zone
And
somewhere.
where are those 46 spaces, you
Yeah,
said?
there's 46 in total. There's, if you look at the current plan, there's 21 we refer to them as reserve spaces. It's on the east side,
Okay, I
right
see it.
next door to this retaining wall. They kind of grade out there. And then there's another 14 and 11 spaces down near the eastern residential. and they're referred to as reserved spaces, as Mark was mentioning.
Okay, so if we issue the order of conditions, and we're referencing these plans, and you begin your construction and do not build those parking spaces at this point in time, the order is good for only a certain amount of years.
Right.
And then if they're not built within that period,
You have to come back.
I mean, you'd have to
We'd
come
have to come
back
back,
to the
yeah.
filing, because
Yeah.
we sort of lose control once we issue a certificate of compliance.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Right, but all of, I guess the point I was making was that while right now they don't show as a paved area, if the determination is made during the course of construction to build them,
Yep.
all the erosion and sediment control, assuming they were gonna be constructed,
Right,
is on
it's
your
in
approved
place.
plans.
Right.
And it's, all the work is basically contemplated already, so we wouldn't be coming back for that. It's
Right,
only gonna be
right.
surprised, so.
Correct. Okay. Okay, let's go to the public for any questions or comments on this hearing. Seeing none. Okay, so board's all set. Does someone want to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, do you want me to submit the copy of the December 26th Graves letter so you have it as part of your record, which is the comments that we still have to
Sure,
address?
yeah.
That'd be
yeah.
fine.
So we'll close this hearing and act on it tonight. Okay,
Thank you for your time.
okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. You guys want some
Roy?
of these back?
Roy, you want any of this?
You might have to,
Yeah,
Might as well.
save some paper.
I think we just need two. Two's plenty. Now, Roy, I guess I have a question.
Yeah, I've got mine too. I was
Will you
I was
be,
marking
you'll
mine
be
up, so.
submitting new plans reflecting these
The
new
Graves
layout?
comments, yes.
and the Graves comment?
Yeah.
All right. So all of these will be superseded, with the exception of the color?
Yeah,
Yeah.
not all of them. Like the Graves comments are probably like 3 out of the grading and drainage plans.
Okay.
And that's about it, so.
All right.
But the layout's gonna stay the same. It's adding a manhole, adding a text to the drain manhole and so forth.
Is that yours? No, that must be yours.
Thank you.
you're welcome, thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah.
I just, thank you.
All right,
There's another, so he didn't want this, huh?
just throw it in there.
Here you go, Ken, sorry about that.
All right, we have another continued public hearing. This one's regarding the notice of intent filed by Volpini Real Estate LLC for the construction of a house, well, and septic system at 25 Kingston Street. Do we have anyone here tonight? Not yet. All right, we're gonna keep this one open and see if the applicant shows. We'll move on to our next one. It's another continued public hearing. It's regarding the notice of intent filed by Salim Ali for the construction of a retaining walls and associated site work at 203 North Quinsigamon Avenue. Andy, was that the one where?
Yeah, they requested for continuance this
Yeah,
afternoon.
ask for the continuation. Okay, so the applicant called in this afternoon and requested that we continue that hearing. They don't have any further information at this time. So that will be continued until our next meeting, which is February, what, Andy, do you know the next meeting date?
One, I think, I forgot to write it down.
I didn't bring my phone, so.
Yeah. It's gonna stay on the third Tuesday. Schedule, I assume.
The 18th.
Yeah,
The 18th? Yeah, I got the 18th.
Yep.
Yep.
All right, so we're going to continue that public hearing until our next meeting, which is February 18th, 2020. Okay, our next hearing, it's also a continued public hearing. It's regarding the notice of intent filed by Resnalde Chavero for the removal of trees, demolition of an existing single-family home, construction of a new single-family home, and retaining walls at 198 South Quinsigamon Avenue.
This is the latest, yeah.
This is no
They were
good.
rolled up, yeah. We dropped them off
These are
today.
no good?
Well, those are the ones they submitted last time. We had some comments on it, so they just dropped those off today.
No good.
No good?
Take one of these.
Yeah, next one.
Yeah, right there, take them. scratch those. Well, no?
You need another one down there, or you gonna show that? All set?
Good evening, I'm Joseph Graham, I'm the engineer for this project. Tonight is with me is Bob O'Neill, the land surveyor. We're here on behalf of Reese, and tonight is a continuation, obviously, of 198 South Quinsigamon. Last time we were here, we received, you guys lifted the enforcement orders that were outstanding on the previously approved plans. Unfortunately, I was not able to make it, but Mr. O'Neill covered for me. Tonight, we wanted to go through some of the revisions to the plans, but our main focus of tonight was to look at the construction of the retaining walls. I know we, part of what is continued is a proposed single-family house, but from discussions with the applicant, he wasn't sure if he wanted to rehab it or construct it at this point. And I think we were, at the onset of this, we were brought in to kind of right the ship and steer him in the correct course in order to get his site plan approved for fixing the existing retaining wall at Lake Quinsigamon and adjusting the grades by adding the 2 proposed retaining walls. Basically, we've kept it the planting plans similar to what was previously approved, as well as we haven't made any changes to that to date. I think there was a comment, looking at my notes for this evening, about 1 or 2 of the trees, but we can make any edits. I believe it was a red maple that we'd like to replace. That's not reflected in tonight's plans, but we can, I believe that's not Asian longhorn beetle resistant, so we'll obviously be editing that. But in general, we're proposing a 2-tiered retaining walls to step or terrace the lot. We're proposing these as field masonry stone walls, similar to actually the existing wall that's out there now, to be in kind with the site. But I guess we're, well, if there's questions, I can answer those.
Can you point out each of those retaining walls on that, the new ones?
So the existing stone retaining wall is along the water edge
Right.
right here, which at the last meeting, we've been able to go out there and resurvey in the location in order to make sure that any repairs done to that existing wall are in kind and in the right location.
Right, and can you tell us what those repairs are gonna consist of? Right now, it's just a mortared stone wall, right?
Correct. Yep, so he'll be doing the same mortar stone. He's hired a mason in order to fix this area with pointing and actual field steps.
In place, in
In
kind.
place, yeah, correct.
All right.
Sorry. Yeah, so Bob O'Neill, the land surveyor, will provide offset stakes in order to make sure that it's verifiable in the field for anyone to come out there and check as the construction's ongoing. And then the first step in the retaining wall is here, is approximately 6.5 foot step. And then it levels out to the proposed planting area on both sides. And there's a walkway connecting this set of stairs to the next set of stairs that goes up the terrace wall into his sloped backyard. And to where he had proposed a house. In
So
kind.
between those 2 new walls, that's sloping, pitching up slightly. It's not flat. Because
Correct.
you do
On
have
the-
stairs.
Yep, on the page 4, I believe I did the cross that shows that, like a 1/4 exaggeration,
Oh, yeah.
showing the walls in those areas.
So it's a slight pitch back.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
And then there's a elevation view of
can you just describe those new walls, how you, I see the footing, so is that just a crushed base, a stone base, or?
So on these are a, similar to, or I can go to this previous page that has the detail. There's actually a concrete base at the bottom, that's 4 feet down. And then it's on that, it's a base for, with field masonry stones pointing, and there's weep holes, 4-inch PVC weep holes every 20 feet, with a crushed stone backfill behind it to provide free draining in that area, so we don't have any hydrostatic pressure, in that wall.
They're gonna require a building permit and, structural engineering submittals and,
Correct.
yeah.
Yep, yeah, which is, I guess, beyond the scope of what, Reese has, asked us to.
Yeah, but
Yes.
to do it, you'll need that.
But don't we need to see that?
Unless we condition it, you know?
I think it should be on our plans.
If it you mean if it changes from this?
Well, this just shows a generic
Yeah, I
stone
know it
wall
does.
with a concrete base, you know? What if it goes to a Versalock wall or?
I mean, we,
As long as the dimensions don't change.
yeah, I mean, conservation has to sign off on the building permit, so
Yeah,
Brad or
no,
I will be
if it
reviewing
gets a building
what they
permit,
physically submit. We will be able to check it, so if it's,
But well, I'll wait my turn.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we can condition it to be stone. His intent is to stick with the stone.
Yeah.
And keep it in kind.
Yeah.
You ready for questions?
Yes.
Martha?
Are you bringing, it looks like you're doing some grading, so you'll be moving things around. Are you planning to bring in any fill?
No, there'll be some backfill structures to this wall, because existing soils aren't sufficient. But outside of this limit of this, this wall, it will be, actually more excavation than backfilling is going to happen in general, because some of this site is a little lower than existing now, in order to make up the differences in the wall, reduce the slope.
I'm all set.
Jason?
I'm all set.
Bob?
Tell me about the sequencing of this work. Plan to do these walls first?
The plan is to take advantage of, the lower level of the water, obviously not the weather right now.
Right.
But in order to reconstruct this along the water's edge before, when the water level is raised. And after that, this area is complete, and then we'll perform the excavation and construction of this wall and work our way up slope into the back here.
So my thought is to condition the order of conditions on a condition that requires you to do this work with these walls first, before we sign off on a building permit for the structure.
Yeah, I think that would be preferable, because he doesn't have a architectural,
All set, Bob?
Yeah.
Ken?
How did you address the grading on the adjacent properties? Did you,
we were able to adjust the grades, heights of the wall a little bit. It was actually just it was kind of just an interpolation thing on the grading of the wall, so they changed maybe by about this much.
so you won't have to go into the budding?
Correct.
All right.
All set. Andy?
just a couple of things. There is obviously the original order of conditions, which started this whole thing, which probably will need closing out. So if you could just submit a certificate of compliance request for that. Are you gonna demolish the existing house? And then just give you more room to work in and out, or is the existing house gonna stay there and you're gonna work around it?
The existing house is gonna stay. If he proposes to redo that, we'll have to come again, through his site plan. But,
Right now, it'll stay in
yeah,
place.
but right now, he's just gonna, I think, do interior renovations.
So he's not putting a new house in now? All right. There was, okay.
Or we're still writing the order for the demo of the existing house?
Well, I wasn't sure, because at one point they were gonna not put a new house on the site, so I just wanted to make sure that,
But we don't have plans, well, they have a proposed footprint.
it says proposed building, that's why it gets a
Yeah, I
little
mean,
confusing, because if they're
it's-
keeping the existing
it is-
house, then that's not what they're building, so we need to clarify.
Referencing these plans as the approved plans.
But they don't have to build it.
No, they don't have to.
So,
Let's write it for the
Yeah.
demo and the proposed
Yeah.
building.
Yeah,
yeah,
Then,
and in 3 years, if they haven't done it,
yep.
they've got to come back.
and the other thing, obviously, that will require the stormwater permit, under the town bylaw. So, I mean, you will have to add some drainage to the site to meet that.
You all said Andy?
Yeah, those are the three big ones, really.
So the issue with the wall that's on the water, so that would have to be conditioned to be rebuilt during drawdown?
Correct. Yes,
So we can put that in the order?
I think yes.
Perfect.
Looking at my notes from last month, we were talking about showing on the drawings any water lines, sewer lines, and footing drains for the proposed building. Did that ever get addressed?
Because he's been in a decent house there.
Well, now again, we can't approve the proposed house if we don't know the utility, it's as simple as just adding lines with this house gets built, and I suppose we could have them bring a modified plan for that.
Yeah, because again, that would
It's
trigger
away
a,
from the lake.
yeah, it would be all signed off. I mean, if they go for a new building, it would be all part of the building permit, it's water and sewer signs off, so, assuming the existing services are reused, we can do it that way, but
And the footing drains would be all part of that.
footing drains would be part of the building permit, Patty will be looking for those,
All right.
and where they
And the
daylight.
only- The only thing I would condition here in our permit is if it is a pump-up system, that we have a manual transfer switch for an emergency generator. Okay, in case power goes out, we'll have a way to run their E1 or whatever pump they choose. Is that okay?
I have another
Go ahead,
question.
Ken.
So it looks like they're not going to do the construction of the house and the landscaping for some time?
The construction of the house, so we'll do the proposed landscaping.
In this area.
That is why the landscaping is kind of focused on this area away from the house and areas that are.
So so if you're going to do the landscaping and the walls and whatnot, you're going to do all the plantings and the stabilization as you go?
Correct. Yeah, because getting a piece of equipment back here will get difficult, especially when we get the stairs.
So you probably won't be able to construct the secondary walls until after next year's drawdown? Because how would you get back down to the lake to rebuild that wall?
I think we want to start here.
Yeah, so the plan is to start here, grade everything. If he has to come back to stabilize, like loam and seed, he'll have to do that by hand.
But all right, so you probably won't be doing any of this work till next fall?
I think the intention is to, depending on weather, obviously, it's too cold right now, but to be doing this work now in order to take advantage of.
When do they put the boards back in?
Yeah, the lake starts to come up at the end of February.
So if we get a break in the weather, that is his goal in order to
You have-
attack this.
There's 20 days to issue the order, correct? So there's-
Yeah, I mean, we would try and issue it, in the next week or so,
There's an appeals period.
and there's a 10-day waiting period. I mean, it's hybrid, you could do it, get a break.
So you could be mid-February.
Yeah, I mean, when the homeowner dropped off the plan, he said that's the one he did want to try and get to, was to get that wall done this season as opposed to next, but really depending on the weather.
Yes, I can.
Yep.
And as part of that, PE approved wall, the new walls, it looks like you're gonna need railings because of the height.
Correct.
So that's gonna have to be part of the condition work, that you're gonna have railings up there. Are we all set here to go?
I just have one more thing. So
Yeah.
the reason we're at this point is because it was the site supposedly was stabilized in the fall. And if we get into a situation where they start work and they leave it, they disturb it again, he's going to have to keep stabilizing that and put the erosion control up and maintain that. Is the erosion control showed on this plan? It was a double,
Yeah, it's a compost filter tube type of line that goes around here, around the whole site.
and I thought we had asked for one to be somewhere midway above the other wall, up above the second wall. Is
Yep,
it
we
one
can,
shown there?
We'll have to add it.
We can add that,
I missed it.
because we'll have to update the plan
All right.
with the change to the red maple.
Okay.
All set. Does anyone in the public have any questions or comments on this hearing? All right, seeing none, we'll close it. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
you're welcome.
New one, right?
This is a new one. Okay, we have a new public hearing. Notice is hereby given in accordance with the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, that John Power, 21 Rich Street, Worcester, Mass., has filed a notice of intent for the demolition and reconstruction of a single-family residence at 246A South Quinsigamon Avenue. The public hearing will be held on the above notice at 7 PM on Tuesday evening. Well, this was said last month, but it's now January 21st, 2020, in the Selectmen's Meeting Room. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Oh, plans? Is there anything?
Oh, yeah, give 'em right there.
Oh,
So it should be there.
Right here. No, right here.
no, over here.
No,
Right here.
Andy will take it.
Thank you.
You're all set. Why don't you introduce yourselves?
All right, I'm Jason Dubois from DC Engineering and Survey. Also, this is John Power, the owner of the property. So the property is 246A South Quinsigamon Avenue. The house is located on the water. There's an existing house currently on the property that is proposed to be demolished, and a new house to be placed basically on the same footprint. There is a proposed deck that goes a little further than the existing house towards the water. And there's multiple on the property walkways and stairways that are proposed to be removed and replaced as shown. And there is one section of retaining wall and stairs down by the water as well that's proposed to be rebuilt with fieldstone type retaining wall. We do have erosion control shown going around the house, around the property, and also below the area where the wall and stairs are to be rebuilt along the water. We have a sequence of construction on the plan up in the top section of the plan, as well as the erosion control barrier. There is floodplain Zone A on this property that's located down by the water. It's an approximate Zone A, there's no actual determined elevation. And that's, I had a section on the plan that references 70 square feet of floodplain alteration. That's basically just a calculation for the wall. The wall height is to remain the same, so there's no flood storage gained or lost. It's just an alteration during construction. That was actually a comment on DEP's, the number, they actually commented on that. They weren't sure where the floodplain was shown, since I did reference that number in the NOI. Also, we have endangered species, natural heritage and endangered species on this property. We did file with them, and they did issue a letter that they have a no-take on this property. I think I got everything on here. I know Brad had some comments. He wanted to see the existing sewer line and water lines, which I did show. I have new plans. I did email him a PDF, but I have new plans that shows that. And he wanted me to also put a note in the sequence of construction that the stockpile areas, if any were left, they would be removed off the site once construction was completed. I think that was about it.
Martha?
So, just to clarify, you're not adding any additional wall on the lake, you're just
Correct.
replacing what's there? Or
Yes.
repairing what's there?
Yes.
Okay. That's all I have.
Jason?
Nothing right now. I'm concerned about the material stockpile areas that you've noted there, very close to the lake.
Yes.
What's that, what will that material be? What's that from?
It basically just shows areas that they could place material if they have any. They're not, there's probably not gonna be much material stockpiled there, because the plan is to utilize the existing foundation.
Oh, okay.
In hopes to use it, that's the plan. If they do have to replace it, then it would be, you
Well,
know.
you'll never get those out of there anyway. Once the foundation's in, you're not gonna get, if you've got stockpiles of materials there,
Yeah, I mean,
you're
there's
not gonna be able
still,
to get it out.
there would still be enough room to, to drive a small track skid steer or machine along the side here, before this deck was built. So, they could get it out if
I
they.
guess I'd prefer to have it up in front of the property rather than behind it, near the lake. In terms of if you're gonna be stockpiling any material. I liked your answer when you said there probably won't be any,
Yeah, I mean,
so.
kinda, I guess I've kinda gotten used to just showing stockpile areas on all
Yeah.
these conservation plans, but I don't know that there's, I mean, do you see any reason for there to be?
After the retaining wall's built, there'll be no material down there whatsoever.
Yeah.
That's just more or less for the fill gravel behind the retaining wall itself.
You all set? Ken?
How do you access, where's the lot line to South Quincy?
So it's kind of a funky shaped lot. South Quinsigamon Ave is up here, and the property, Lake Quinsigamon's down here. So the property, goes along the water, it comes up here, and then this comes over to here and connects here. And then this opens back up and it goes up, so there's a driveway right away that comes down here.
Okay.
It's the right-of-way, it's not actually part of the lot, but a right-of-way?
This is
That's part of the lot.
Correct, yeah. So it connects just through this small little section right through here. It connects this piece with this piece.
Sir, for the
That's what, a
confusion,
10-foot section, or?
it's 10 feet. The right-of-way was for an old piece of property at 240, I believe it was 248 in South Quincy that was demolished.
13 feet. How much is,
And the owner of the house next to that bought that property and put an addition with a pool, or he's in the process of doing so. So the old right-of-way was for a house that doesn't exist anymore.
This hearing is for 246A, correct? The one fronting on the lake. The
Yes.
home up of South Quinsigamon is 246.
Yes.
Do you own that house?
That's in my family, but I do
It's in
not
your
own it,
family,
yes.
but that right-of-way is part of the lot for 246. It's not owned by 246A.
It's owned by 246A. The right-of-way that it states that the home that used to be next to 246A, the home that doesn't exist anymore, it was
Yeah.
demolished this past winter.
On this property here.
Okay,
That was a right-of-way for them to access their home that doesn't exist anymore.
okay, so that right-of-way, actually, it shouldn't be saying right-of-way, it should be, it's not a right-of-way if you own it.
Yes,
It's your drive.
Exactly. Now,
So
if,
it's all part of the one lot, is what you're telling me. What says right-of-way is part of 246A.
Yes,
So
sir.
that should not say right-of-way.
the right-of-way may still be legally allowing the neighbor who bought that property, demolished it, put an addition, if he wanted to get a machine down there, I
Oh,
believe
okay.
he may be able to do so.
That runs with the other lot.
Yes, that neighbor I believe that right-of-way is transferred to him, so if he ever needed to access the property via that, I can't imagine why he would ever need to, but I believe he can. And right now, I'm allowing him to use it to get his material down to his home contracting vehicles.
So the gap that makes these two kind of pieces contiguous is what, about 4 feet, 5 feet?
About that, yes, sir.
Okay, well, I guess that's not our business, that zoning matter, or, did that make it legal? Is that a legal lot?
Well, it's probably pre-existing non-conforming. My other question was how are you gonna get a machine through there? But if they're
Well,
common, if they're
yeah.
common ownership, it's not
Yeah,
an issue
right,
then,
exactly.
so. that-
And this property has been through zoning board of appeals.
Yes, sir, it was
Oh,
approved.
so you went through, CBA?
Weird,
Yeah,
huh?
because otherwise it's a new building, right? I mean, it would have,
I
yeah.
don't know. That's
Yeah,
up to
it's,
them.
it's,
I see a E1 sewer pump noted down between the stockpiles.
Yes, sir.
So that's proposed?
That's existing.
That's existing.
That's the existing one, okay. And that's going to serve the new home?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the one thing we'd like to see is a manual transfer switch in case power goes out. So when you're doing your electrical on the new home,
It's a wonderful
to
idea.
wire that in.
Yes, sir. I believe it has that, but I'm not 100%
So
sure.
you can
but-
take a portable generator at least,
Yep,
and
you
you
can
can
pump
keep
it
your
out.
sewer going, because you're gonna be on town water.
Yes.
Yeah, so, yeah, you would definitely want that. All right, are we all set here?
The retaining wall that's shown in the front of the house, is that existing with the stairs?
Yes, it's gonna be relocated. So in light gray is the existing. I'm sorry, are you talking about the lake side or behind the home?
Behind the
on
home.
On the street side?
Yeah.
Yeah,
In light gray, it's the existing. In the dark gray is the proposed. So it's continuing. Instead of going down like in L-shaped, it's gonna continue straight and just
Oh,
even
I
up with the
see.
stairs.
Yeah, okay. And that's gonna be made as a fieldstone?
The plan is fieldstone, depending on the engineering, it's gonna be a little over 6 feet tall, so if he wants to do a concrete with a veneer on it, I may, but ideally, it's gonna be the same material that the neighbor used on his retaining wall, which is all a fieldstone.
Okay.
Foundation drain, I see it, but I don't see where it's outlet, where it outlets. Can you? It says, well,
Yeah, it outlets down to here, the riprap
Okay.
spillway. I'm not sure that there's even a foundation drain there now, is there?
no, it just says foundation wall, I thought it said drain. So you don't show the foundation drain on this one?
Well, it comes out down in the lower corner here and heads towards the
All
water.
right, so if you save the foundation, that's just reusing the old drain.
Yeah, it's a
So
reusing
it's
drain.
really not a new drain.
Not 100%. The house was built in 1900,
Yeah.
so I would assume that there hasn't been any issues with
When do you
flooding.
make the decision whether you're gonna keep the old foundation or not? Is
That's
that
in demolition.
during the demolition phase?
I trust, if the engineer says it'll last another 50 years the way it is, I would like to keep it.
Yeah.
If he says he can't guarantee 20, 30 years, I wouldn't put a $300,000 structure on a
No, I know.
120-year-old.
No, that's what I'm wondering, yeah. Okay. All right, are we all set here? Andy, you all set?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, so we postponed it last time because we hadn't heard from National Heritage and DEP, and say Brad had the 3 comments, which I think have been addressed, so.
What was the rare species they found, or,
They didn't find any,
oh, they didn't find anything?
no.
Well, I think there's something that's mapped, but they never really tell
mapped,
you what's.
I'll tell you what it is.
They
what
don't,
it
they
is.
don't say what it
No.
was? No.
I think there's a plant down there in that corner.
Okay.
There is one additional item too that we did add to this plan, is that there's a oak tree located near the retaining wall. Right here, that's a little ways up from the edge of the water that he's proposing to remove as well. That was not on the original plan.
That's on the new plan, that's your,
Yeah, I have 2 copies here.
What's the reason for removing it?
And 2 times that I'm aware of, the retaining wall has gotten pushed in because of the tree. It's a beautiful tree. I wish I didn't come to the decision that I'd like to remove it. My grandfather planted that in the 1940s. And, the seasons and change colors, it's very pretty. But on that slope, on that side of the lake, I've seen so many times, a healthy tree just falls in, takes out the retaining wall, takes out your neighbor's boat. and takes out his dock too. And there's 3 trees, 2 big ones, 1 smaller one. I'm keeping the other 2. I just want the one that is gonna push the retaining wall in eventually. There's like permission to take that out.
Ken, do you have any concerns about the roots when that tree comes down?
What was that?
Do you have any concerns about the roots of that tree when it comes down?
Well, yeah, you mean where it growing into the wall?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can see it's happening to our walls now too. It's a problem. I hate to see the tree go, but I understand why.
So when you take the tree down, I assume you'll do that when you're repairing the retaining wall?
That would
And
be
you'll be able
the
to
absolute
remove
first
the
thing we would
roots.
do would be take the tree down. And then it would be rebuild the retaining wall, fix the retaining wall, strengthen it, and work our way from the lake backwards.
Will you remove the trunk and the root system?
Yes,
Then?
yes. It's gonna be, anything that's gonna interfere with everything's gonna get removed.
Okay. Because that'll change, I mean, I understand why the tree has to go, but it'll change the drainage pattern down there. So just be prepared for that.
Put it next.
No, just put superseded. Right down there.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
There is a revision noted on that plan, revision 1.
What's that?
There's revision 1.
Yeah,
shown
I
on
know.
that.
Okay, we're all set. Does anyone in the public have any questions or comments on this hearing? All right, I don't see any. Close the hearing. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for your time.
This is the superseded, really take it.
Closing it? Are we closing it?
I think we're all, how many do we have? No?
2.
Yeah, we took it on 2 is all we really need, so.
All set.
Pull that one up there. How do I do? Oh, the new one, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A lot of information here.
All right, we have a new hearing. Notice is hereby given in accordance with the provisions of general laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, that DM Custom Building and Remodeling LLC, 67 Bumblebee Circle, Shrewsbury, has filed a request for determination of applicability for the construction of a single-family home addition and deck at 31 Bumblebee Circle. The public meeting will be held on the above request at 7 PM on Tuesday evening, January 21, in the Selectmen's Meeting Room. Good evening.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm Jennifer Meter, my husband David. We own DM Custom Building, and we purchased 31 Bumblebee Circle, up the street from where we live, actually. And we are renovating it, doing interior renovations, and wanted to put an addition out the back of it. We have survey plans. Do you want 3 while you're looking?
3 would be good.
That would be good. Thanks.
I have an easel, so. I have copies of the building plan too, if you wanted that. It was-
So just why don't you describe, is it a full foundation under your addition, or?
No, we actually, originally we were going to do a full foundation, and we put in the permit to do that. Everything was approved, and David went to start the digging, and Brad showed up and said, halt, everything, hold on. I guess they didn't, I'm not sure what happened. They didn't realize a stream was back there or something. So it got stopped, and that's when we went back and talked to Alex Moriarty at the building department about what our options, would it be better to do it on forms, or not forms?
Footings.
Footings.
Sonotubes.
Sonotubes,
Yeah.
basically.
So we basically decided that's fine. It's not gonna hinder anything to do it that way instead. I mean, we're not gonna have a full basement. but that's okay. So the job was stopped, but we went in and installed the whole, what's it called? The whole,
The footings.
no, the environmental
Oh, yeah.
control barrier, did the hay bales, did the whole silt fence
Yeah.
and
It's all ready to go.
that was all installed. They said we had to stop until that was installed, so it was all done. Brad came back out and Alex did and approved it. And they allowed the building to commence, so the footings have been put in and inspections have been going and.
Are you familiar with this, Eric?
Yeah, it was an after the fact, I mean,
Is this really a brook, or is it just
It
a
is-
drainage swell?
and there is a BVW for it, but it's really, it's just a drainage swell.
Yeah.
So originally.
Rail, stream, or anything like that?
No, so originally Brad had signed off on it, and then when we started looking at zooming out, we realized that there is a resource area, so like
Yeah.
you said, they'd already started, so we just went out and said, well, let's just get the ducks in a row. So it's kind of an after-the-fact filing, but
Yep.
All right, and any grading out in the yard? Did you say,
It's gonna stay the same, basically.
okay, so it's the sonotubes, then everything, there's really not much digging back there?
No,
then, or
just-
Foundations?
Just like a deck, basically, kinda.
Yeah.
These are the, if you wanted to see the building.
All right. Martha, do you have any?
What are you using for an erosion control barrier?
For
The
the,
hay bales.
there's a silt fence buried 6 inches down in hay bales, full hay bales.
All right, thanks.
Jason? I'm all set. Bob?
There'll be no digging though, right? Other than
Just to
the-
put the footings in.
Yeah, right, the sonotube, okay. No
Yeah.
questions.
Ken?
And they're already in,
Yeah.
so you're all set.
And they've been inspected and, yeah, I
Alright.
guess.
Okay.
Andy, anything else?
no, as I say, this is really kind of after the fact, just to give a paper
Any-
trail.
Does anyone in the public have any questions on this hearing? All right, I don't
Mr.
see
Chairman,
any.
I would move that we issue a negative determination with regards to this petition.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
You can have one of these back. Vicky too. Thank you.
You're welcome. Do it, Bob, for me.
Well, I'd like to give you,
That's it, you know. That's what I'm talking about.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for your help. Oops, when I can,
One more?
no, I lost my agenda.
All right, we have another brand-new hearing. Notice is
Thank you, sir.
hereby given in
Move more.
accordance with the
Move more.
provisions of
Whole
general
pile.
laws, chapter 131, section 40. That's 7 Cheryl Realty Trust,
going.
24 Cheryl Drive, Shrewsbury, has filed a notice of intent.
No, that's it,
A
thanks.
site work associated with the construction of a single-family house at 577 South Street. A public hearing will be held on the above notice at 7 PM on Tuesday evening, January 21st, in the Selectmen's Meeting Room. Do we have someone here? No one's here for this hearing?
It's one of her sheets, so I don't know.
All right.
I can tell you, I mean, we don't have a DEP number anyway, so
No.
we would probably continue it. but-
That's right. Do you want to just continue it?
Yeah, I
Tell me
mean,
it's-
it's pretty straightforward.
What is it?
Well, it's a single-family home as a septic. It already had an order of conditions for the septic system in the back.
Yep.
The order had expired, and the applicant had revised the septic to put in a stone wall to meet breakout, but he put the wall right on the 100-foot buffer, so realistically.
You want to look at it?
No, let's continue it.
Yeah, and
Yeah, we're going to have to continue.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so that's it, and there's an order of conditions that have to be closed out, so.
They should be here.
All right. This particular hearing, we're going to continue, the applicant isn't here, but also the file number hasn't been issued by DEP, and we don't like to close a hearing if there isn't a file number.
Okay.
So we'll hear this one at our next meeting, which is February 18th. That's it for the hearings, right?
Correct.
All right, do you want to go right into the orders of
No,
condition?
let's do this, that's what these people are here for, the Trails.
Oh, okay. All right, we're going into our new and old business, and we're going to do the first item, A, which is Trails Committee discussion. That's what you people are here for? Why don't you come on up to the desk, please? The Trails Committee discussion regarding trails at the former Camp One Again property at 645 Grafton Street.
Can we put that, is that something you want to put up on the board?
Well, I want to make sure you all can see
Well,
it.
Yeah, but we're,
Here, I'll help you.
Something I could just sort of, I didn't bring extra copies here.
That's all right, we'll just put it up on the board because we're on TV, you know, so people
Oh,
want to see.
okay. Would be good.
How do I do this?
I figured you had a,
I thought you had a plan.
Yeah, I thought I did
is there any
too.
clips, is there? Is there clips on the top?
Is this a clip?
No, I
No,
don't think
it's
it
not a
is.
clip.
It's to be
do
valid.
they
You
have
don't have any
anything in
paper
the
or
back
anything,
room?
right? No tape or anything?
It's all high-tech now.
I didn't realize this was a bring your own easel event.
They don't give us much to work with.
We'll have to wing it.
You have to wait.
Well, wing it. Okay, well, I can hold it up, right?
Why don't you come right up here?
Yeah.
Put it right on the middle, right up in here.
So, all right, well, let me just say, I'm Melanie McGee from the Trails Committee. This is Martha Maletta. This should take you a very short amount of time. It's a very simple proposal for a new trail. The background to this is, I don't know if you're familiar with the park, Camp One Again, but it has probably an elevation of about 100 feet in variation in the park. And as you enter from Grafton Street, cross the brook and go up the hill, if you make a left at the derelict building and go up the hill, that's a good climb. We have found that when we have elderly people on guided walks, or, you know, people who just underestimate their capabilities, sometimes they get up there and you go over the hill, and then you find that to get back, you climb the hill again and come down again, and it gets to be a problem. We have discovered that there is a way around that is virtually flat. It seems to be all along the same elevation line. It would be a simple matter, doesn't involve any tree removal or anything, to just make a little cutoff. And aside from the convenience of walkers who get tired halfway, it hasn't escaped our notice that this might be a useful access in case somebody needed to be evacuated for a medical emergency or something. So that's why we're proposing this. It's been walked several times, flagged. There's very little work that needs to be done. It just needs to be basically brushed off, maybe a few little minor shrubs trimmed back a little bit. No tree removals, no any really significant vegetation, maybe a little bit of low blueberry, just to create the footpath.
Yeah, the essence of the path.
The footway through there.
And it would join an existing trail.
And we had initially, my husband and Melanie and I had walked there just to get an idea of what was possible there. Then we asked Brad Stone, knowing that it was Conservation Commission property, we said, okay, we've got to go to the Conservation Commission. So we talked to Brad, and he arranged for us to meet Andy Truman from engineering.
Andy Truman.
And then Brad joined us, and Mark
I was there.
joined
Yeah.
us to see what we were talking about there. It seems like, you know, a pretty straightforward project. It's not very close to the stream there, and no tree removals, but Brad and Martha, you know, strongly asked us to come to the commission to get sort of final approval to go ahead with developing this trail. And trail development is one of the things that the Trails Committee, you know, tries to focus on in addition to maintenance of existing trails. So that's what we've got. It's, you know, not a
So
very
this
long
would
section.
become trail number 5, right? I
Yeah.
mean, so you have
Yeah.
4 of them out there now, and this will be 5, and short one.
Yeah, it's not gonna be a big deal.
No.
Nope.
In the realm of trail development, it's a pretty simple.
Looks like it's about 400 feet long, or a little, maybe a little over that, but not much.
Not much.
Yeah, I thought about a tenth of a mile or so.
Yeah.
You know, based on guesstimates. Obviously, once it was approved and we would start to do the clearing would be, you know, loose debris, as I said, a little bit low vegetation, you know, not all that significant
Right.
there. Then on many of the trails, we've used simple painted blazes on the trees just to indicate where the trail is. And, yeah, it would be, you know, pretty straightforward project.
So what does this require from us? Just a motion? or-
I would assume that it's just an alteration of Conservation Commission land. I would just make a motion to accept the alteration, and
I second that motion.
all in favor?
Aye.
You got Trail 5.
Thank you for what you do.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, like, these maps are, this is fantastic. This is from Dan McCullen in the engineering department has developed these
Very
maps
nice.
for us. And this one is getting ready to go into an updated one into the kiosk that's right there.
Oh, that's
Whatever
right.
happened to the upgrade of the facility, the house out there? There were Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts that were coming through saying they were gonna do different things to it, and I don't think any of those took off.
It was probably too intimidating.
Too much, is it too
That
far
building,
gone?
The old cinder block building?
Yeah,
Or your Girl Scout and.
It would, I think would take more than scouts. I would need I think, an initiative from the town to do that. And it would be a toss-up as to whether it would be better to tear it down.
Right.
yeah,
So-
because what would you really
What would you
use
use
it
it
for?
for?
I mean,
I know,
if you
it's a little too off the beaten trail to be
Yeah.
practical, and that also makes it something of a hazard. I would not want my children there, you know.
Yeah,
So it's not, we don't feel it's up to us to make that decision, so.
Yeah, unfortunately, it has become it's an attractant to activity.
yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah, we do.
graffiti and stuff out
We do have a
there.
couple of illegal lodges there sometimes.
All right,
Thank you
well,
for your
thank you.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so where do we want to go? We want to hop right into
You
the,
want to do this next thing?
how about community, is somebody here for community preservation?
Yes,
Yeah, they're supposed to be, yes.
Okay, is that the guy out there?
yes.
I hope so.
Okay. We'll do that one then. All right, we're going to do the community preservation. Want to come up to the table, please?
Okay.
All right, we have a CPA ballot committee discussion regarding the Community Preservation Act.
Double duty, huh?
Yes, I have to specify at this point, I'm representing the CPA ballot committee, along with Jason Molina.
Welcome, and I do have documents here to hand out. They're also available in electronic format, which I can make that available.
Thank you. Do you have enough for everybody, Jason?
I do have enough for everybody.
Okay. I think you
So
might
we're
get your
gonna
own.
work off the stapled document that's attached there. And with the last 2 pages, there's additional 2 pages that are included as well, just for reference material, not part of tonight's discussion, but as a takeaway as well. Melanie, thank you for the introduction. So Melanie and I are here along representing the Community Preservation Shrewsbury Ballot Committee. We're a small group of Shrewsbury residents and volunteers who are passionately interested in having CPA, Community Preservation Act, adopted in Shrewsbury. So these, to get to what is CPA, if you're not familiar with it, the Community Preservation Act was a state enacted legislative decision that was put into enactment in 2000. Since then, 176 towns and cities have adopted the CPA, including our neighbors in Grafton, Northborough, and West Boylston. And what CPA does is it establishes a dedicated fund for open space and recreation, historic preservation, and affordable housing. And as you are pretty familiar with the town budget, those particular items are really hard to fund because other priorities take precedence, such as education, safety, maintenance of roads, et cetera. And so with CPA, we get to fund these specific categories And they're funded through an imposition of a surcharge of not more than 3% of the tax levy against real property. That's per the text of the CPA. And later on in the presentation, I'll cover what we're specifically proposing and some figures to back that up. And why now? We are seeking to have a ballot question in the November election. And so teeing up with that, lining up with that election is what our hope is, because we know that there's going to be a lot of folks that will be going out to vote on the presidential race. And so with that builds in a need to go out to the door. And so while they're there, we'd like for them to be voting on whether to adopt CPA. So on slide 3, we're going to cover open space and what that is from a CPA perspective. So there's some bolded verbs here, which are going to be a repeated theme in the next few slides, because that is the specific language of how a CPA says you can spend the money on to approve projects. So CPA can be used for open space related to acquisition, the creation, and preservation of open space, and the rehabilitation and restoration of open space that is acquired or created by the Act. And so some examples to that are acquire open space throughout Shrewsbury, preserving more land that directly impacts the public water supply, wetlands, wildlife, and plant habitats, so keeping that in mind, and preserving parcels in town from development, if that is so the wish of the interest of the group. So on slide 4, I call out some examples from projects in our neighborhood or nearby. Northborough, as an example, used their CPA funds to create their town common. So if you go through Main Street, you'll see that new space that they've created using CPA funds, and that was $480,000 of CPA funds, most recently approved in 2016 to create that. Harvard has used their CPA funds, $26,000 of it, to control and eliminate invasive plants on town-owned conservation land acquired by CPC funds.
The approval date here, is that the date that the CPA was approved in that community?
Yes.
Okay.
That was the approval, of the project in that community. Yes.
How long did it take Northborough to accumulate $480,000?
So funding, there is a requirement to, you have to put either reuse or reserve 10% of the funds that come in annually towards the 3 categories. So open space and recreation are combined into 1, affordable housing, and then historic preservation. So the CPC, which is a commission that would be created outside, and I'll cover that later on in the presentation, but they'll decide on projects, and they'll say, hey, you know, where do we want to put our monies for this project in this year's budget?
Bob, I believe Northborough was an early adopter of the CPA program, so I don't know how many years, but they've had some time to.
Well, he'll probably have some projections for Shrewsbury too, so I'll let him.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry to have interrupted.
Absolutely, that's okay. I mean, just to also point out, we're here also to hear your feedback on the other proposal, right? We're making our rounds to different committees.
Talk to anybody.
Yeah, exactly. So,
At length.
So just to hear, you know, what it is concerning, and also just some ideas about how to carry this forward. So continuing on with the examples here, West Boylston used their $172,000 of grant money for the purchase of 12 acres from the Greater Worcester Land Trust, administering the conservation restriction, and then using the funds also to close and for the closing legal costs associated with that land purchase. And then lastly, and I'll read this one out because it's pretty lengthy, but I think it hits the point about what you can do with CPA. As an example, $500,000 in air were used for the Community Preservation Committee with support from Conservation Commission and Open Space Committee. This article, in this case for air, created a conservation fund for which funds would be used for the purpose of acquiring lands for the purpose of conservation, open space, and/or passive recreation. The fund will be overseen by the Conservation Commission and the town treasurer as the custodian of the funds. So really creative ways to use this monies for objectives that, you know, a lot of, things like conservation commissions and other entities that we most interested in CPA, having them be enabled to exercise the objectives you're trying to achieve as well. All right, moving on to slide 5, recreation. Again, verbs. The acquisition, creation, preservation, rehabilitation and restoration of land for recreational use. Examples there, dog parks, creating walking and bike trails, creation of rehabilitation of public playgrounds and splash parks, playgrounds for accessibility per ADA. So as the prior conversation was about approval of the trail in Camp Wonigan, if there was any monies that were necessary to fund that kind of activity, whether it be adding benches, signage, that's an opportunity available through CPC. Of course, if that was approved by the Community Preservation Committee, that will be created from this. Just some projects they're calling out here. In Grafton, they used $41,000 for the design and engineering work to determine costs for recreational upgrades, for a deteriorated road, parking design, ADA compliant restrooms, boat dock. There was also in Grafton also $54,000 for the recreational improvements to Town Beach, adding sand, grills, canopy, and improved handicap accessibility. Air added a dog park. Acton restored their playground from 1996 that was in dire need of repair. There they had a combination of using CPA funds and private funding to make that happen. Moving on to slide 7. I know this is not the purview of the Conservation Commission, but I'll just bring up to this body what the other pillars of CPA and what they fund. Historic preservation is for the acquisition, preservation, rehabilitation, and restoration of historic resources, things like qualifying historic buildings, preserving those, restoring historic artifacts, funding archaeological surveys, and preserving records, and by digitizing. Some key examples that noteworthy that you'll probably hear about, White Cliffs in Northborough was a prime example of taking a historic building and holding onto it, requiring it. Right, that was $2.4 million of CPA funds. And then Southborough used, now here's an interesting thing, I want to point out, Southborough, because the funds are predictable, they can be then put towards a bond issuance. So Southborough had a CPA-funded bond of $970,000 to fund that effort. Lastly, we go to slide 9, affordable housing. Their new verb is added here, which is support. So affordable housing can be supported using CPA funds. This is for the creation of low-income senior or special needs housing, acquiring historic structures for affordable senior housing. So there's a twofer there. Basically, you can take the old buildings that have come off the registers, off the rolls from using as a municipal building, and you can convert them to affordable housing if that was the pleasure of the boards and the town and developers that come in to make that happen. And a prime example of that on slide 10 is that AIR used their former fire station and converted that to 6 affordable rental units. And there was CPA funds of $150,000, private funding, and also state funding as well to make that happen. So what is our proposal? Our proposal is that the ballot committee is proposing that Shrewsbury opt in by adopting CPA with a conservative surcharge of 1% of the tax levy against real property and including allowable exemptions under the law. If approved by ballot referendum, that's key, right? Because it's not town meeting, it's the ballot referendum that will approve or decline this addition. The community can hold another referendum in the future to adjust the surcharge, adjust the exemptions, or even revoke the adoption. So that's a key thing, because I know some folks may say, well, if we vote this in, are we stuck with it? And the answer is no, because it can be revoked should the community desire that. I will say that to date, 176 towns and cities have adopted it, 0 have removed it. Several have adjusted it to either go up or down in terms of their surcharges. So now onto the costs. Slide 12, the cost of property owners. So the table right there, as you see, is meant to be as an illustration related to what your house price may cost. This is from a single property owner perspective. The average single-family property value is based on the FY20 information is $478,603. So for a home that's, again, $478,000 thereabouts, The annual property surcharge under the proposal will be $47.21 for the year. So you divide it over the quarterly payments, that's a little over $11. $11 to fund, per quarter, to fund all the opportunities that I described in the prior slides. So with that, there are some exemptions, like I mentioned earlier, that we're looking to adopt. 100% surcharge exemption for qualifying low-income property owners. 100% surcharge exemption for qualifying low to moderate income senior property owners. And I'll stop with those two pieces there. The qualifying component of this is that the U.S. Housing and Urban Development Department has a rate table that defines what is a low-income property owner and a low to moderate income senior. So that is certainly not something that will be debated in Shrewsbury, but this is rather something that we can point to and say, here's a table that's public, and if you qualify for that, you come to town, I believe you go to the town assessor at that time, if this was adopted, and you would apply for on an annual basis an exemption to the surcharge. So the reason why we're proposing to include this is because, we recognize that, there's been a lot of projects coming through town and a lot of other rate charges hitting the town. And so this is an opportunity to lessen the burden on our population that would be that may be the most at risk for having one more thing added to their rolls, right, into their pocketbooks. So this is a way to alleviate that concern at our most concerned population. And then on top of that, there's also, for all residential classes, commercial and industrial properties, the first $100,000 of taxable property value is automatically deducted to calculate a CPA surcharge. So we're already baking in a little savings even for everybody else as well. So now if we go back to that rate table, you see that, and I'll put this example, at 200, if your home is still, if you have a home in Shrewsbury that's still valued at $200,000, you're gonna pay $12 for the year, right? So this is, if you're still in a very small property, maybe you've been here for 50-plus years, you're impacted the least if you don't already qualify for one of these exemptions.
And so Jason, sorry to interrupt, but if I am a senior on a fixed, very low income, will I be impacted by this?
So it will depend on whether your income reaches the threshold for qualifying for moderate income senior housing. So that is information that
Do we have an idea of what that is?
It's about $64,000 for the year. We can make that available on our website, which we would just be pulling in from the HUD rate table. There is an opportunity there that if the town wants to do this, you can also leverage this for the affordable housing stock. So if we do that, then the income levels actually drop a little to the 80% level, so that then you can use the housing that's created under this act to be part of towards the 10% threshold. So that's why there's some gray in there, but basically there is income levels that are public, and you can see what the 80% amount is and the 100% amount is. And certainly that is a decision to be made down the pike. It wouldn't be at this point.
Jason, if you're bringing this up for a referendum, you really, I think most people are gonna take a look, what's the impact to me?
Yes.
So this is gonna become a key table. So if you're saying there are exemptions, I don't think it's gonna suffice to just say, oh, you can go to a HUD table and figure it out. You gotta put the numbers right out there for people to see in black and white what their impact's gonna be, because you're gonna get a lot of people coming in, and if they don't know if they qualify, they're just gonna say, well, geez, it's not enough info, I'm voting no. So you're gotta lay it out, what's the impact?
Thank you, fair point.
Yeah.
Certainly something that we can build into our presentation as we move
Because how are you
forward.
gonna push this out to the public before the vote? Are you going to be on cable TV making presentations? I mean, tonight's one night, but that's not going to.
Oh, sure. And actually,
reach many people.
before we even, of course, this is our wish is to be on the ballot for November, but to get there, there's a process,
Right.
right? So our first session is going through these, through these boards and commissions to speak to what's being proposed. We've also reached out to the Board of Selectmen, and they've asked us to also speak with these commissions first to get the feedback. So our idea is that we're going to be going to town meeting and requesting to be on the ballot, whether it be through the selectmen raising a warrant article or a petition that we would submit. We'll see how that goes. Obviously, we would like to go through the Board of Selectmen for that, for their guidance and their support. But then, if that is approved by town meeting to move forward with a ballot question, then obviously we have a whole throat of activities to do to make the public aware about what's being
Correct,
proposed.
yeah. Because I'm thinking back years ago when the Community Preservation Act came out, we considered this. I don't know, you guys must know that this was once up in front of the town, I think early on. And I don't think it got very far. I can remember somebody coming into the Concom, I was on the Concom back then, and sort of making a presentation like this. And again, it was new, so you didn't have the advantage of showing what people did with the money.
Right.
You know, and it was just another added cost the way I saw it. And it seemed to not get far, and I can't tell you how far it did get, but it would be good to check back to see if somebody was around in that era and what avenues they took, which weren't successful.
You know, it's a benefit and a loss that we've let this much time pass. Now 176 towns have done this.
I see it, yeah.
And we've got all these wonderful examples.
Yeah.
And we have lost out on money over the years that, in the state match and so on. And we could have been doing a lot of things. So that, is a negative. On the other hand, now,
Well, no, but you're really talking about a 1% increase on your property tax, right?
yes, with the $100,000 exemption, yes.
A 1% increase on your property tax. So if there are in fact valid activities or land purchases or things like that, those things could be funded through a property tax increase, which has a structure through the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee, that's already been used for 100 years, is how to raise money. In fact, this community has stepped up quite aggressively a few years ago by approving a $5 million override to buy open space.
Well, that is a
speaks well
big
to the
project.
community.
I mean, the CPA covers a wide range of activities. I remember, I was involved in some Northborough projects through a long combination of circumstances. They did things like, one was a simple flagpole in the park. That was not much money. There were things that were very expensive. I was particularly involved in the Historical Society upgrades that were $50,000, renovated that building to the point where it'll last many more years now. It was built in 1860. So you can't expect, a big override or anything for those millions of little
I would.
projects.
I look at the purchase of that $2.5 million building in Northborough.
Yep.
If it was worth doing, why would it not have been worth doing it with an override?
Well, it does, it brings out a lot of people who might not otherwise want to take action. Like the Historical Society in Northborough is not.
That's precisely my point. You're saying, these activities, if they're in fact valid, should be valid across the entire community.
Well.
And would.
Yeah, so I mean, I hear what you're saying, related to large-scale projects.
I'm not sure how
Yeah, no, of course. But I think the beauty of CPA is that we're not deciding here or at the ballot box about what project, right?
Exactly.
Projects, individual
Not our
projects
choice.
are not on the ballot. That is to be decided through CPC as a organization of which the Conservation Commission is actually would be providing a member into that. So we'll cover that in terms of like what is a CPC. But that board, that commission, and along with town meeting as an approval body, would actually say, do we want this project or not, right? Or the fund, or the appropriation of the funds to put into these buckets. So if it was the desire of the CPC to say, hey, we don't want to fund large-scale projects, we think there should be through another mechanism, and of course, not the purview of the CPC to say how it's funded, those other projects. Of course, we know that may mean an override if that was the desire of the community to do that. but an override is not the same as what we're asking for from a CPA.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not the same. So
say
CPA
it's
is
better.
just, this is better because it gives you.
No, I'd say, the override is better, because it actually measures the sentiment of the entire community, as opposed to a committee that can somewhat unilaterally decide where this money goes. But once again, I want you to finish.
Yeah, no, of course, of course.
Well,
Of
can
course.
I just add one thing? The one advantage, I think, that you have with the CPA is, if I heard you right, it forces you to use some of this money every year. Is that correct? You have to?
It's to spend or reserve 10% of those funds towards the three categories. So they lump open space and recreation to one category,
Right.
affordable housing and historic preservation. So again, the tenet of why CPA came about is because those pillars
Yeah.
were never getting funded, or
Right.
rarely getting funded in a community.
And there's always a need there. There's always a need.
There's always a need.
And this gives you the opportunity, at least it's almost a forced way of making you do something toward, meeting those needs.
Exactly. And of course, it's also based on the community, right? The community votes for it in an affirmative in the referendum, right? Then it says, yes, we believe in these things. We want to see them funded, right? So that's the opportunity CPA brings with us. And I understand there's totally a place for an override or debt exclusion, right, to fund the largest projects. But again, I'd offer that that's not the same topic as CPA. And it really, not only CPC, the commission that would be created with this, a body that would approve the slate of projects to go to town meeting, but town meeting, you'd hear about these projects. You hear about them, you debate them, and that's the opportunity raised here, right? So it wouldn't just be 9 members sitting in a room and saying, this is what I want to do, right? It really
This has to be voted on at town meeting.
the appropriation of funds.
Yeah, each project has to be voted on and approved by the town meeting.
All right, if we go to slide 13, so what is the money looking to bring in here from CPA? The surcharge is estimated to generate over $500,000 annually. Shrewsbury would also receive, in addition to the monies locally funded, this is new so Melanie actually brought up that this is monies that we could have been getting.
Yes.
But there's also a state matching fund. That's variable, so we don't look at it as a projection saying we're counting on it, but we're looking towards the opportunity that the state would also
What has it been
provide.
historically, that match?
When the CPA came about in 2000, it was 100% of the time.
Yes.
So it has dwindled, of course, because more communities have adopted CPA.
You know what it was last year, the match?
I believe it was in the 40s.
40%?
I believe so, but don't quote me on that.
But if it was 30%, it would generate another 150,000.
Well, there was an increase that the governor had signed in order to fund CPA, the trust fund at the state level, okay, to increase this is funded through their fees from the Register of Deeds, and that's how anybody who's doing a transaction in Shrewsbury through land transactions, real estate transactions, I should say, is already paying into this trust fund. But we're not able to tap into that fund at all. We're not getting anything back from the state because we're not a CPA adopted community. So that's money out the door that we're not leveraging.
Let me suggest, if I may, that's probably one of the most valid arguments you're going to make. If you can establish some historical record of what that matching is, if it's 30%, now you're using your $500,000.
It's nice to keep that money in
to
town.
generate 650.
It's like contributing to
Yeah, I mean,
your
to me, that's a very-
401K, your employer's.
That's a very valid point.
I have tried to ascertain from the Registry of Deeds how many people had a transaction that resulted in a fee. I have not heard back from them, but I do have a list of, let me pass this
Is
to you. I
that
only have one
match
copy.
uniform through all the CPA communities? Or is it based on the transfers within each community?
No, they get whatever percentage they get.
It's statewide?
This is
Statewide.
Yeah, okay.
This is a list of what they charge, and this goes into the CPA fund for each of these particular kind of document things. You'll notice they range from $1 for copies
Yeah.
to, I think, $255 for a declaration of trust.
Yeah.
So I think that could add up.
Well, it's just a suggestion, and I think that's a very good selling point if you can generate what that share has been over the last 5 or 6 years.
Well, I'll try to extort that information from them if they could cough it up. They're usually pretty good, talking to me, but we'll see.
Pretty substantial.
All right. So then going into the approval process, that's slide 14. Local control will be kept through the CPC. That would be a committee that would be formed based on 9 members, proposed 9 members, of which the Conservation Commission would be required to present a member to this board, along with the Planning Board, Historic Commission, Housing Authority, Parks and Cemetery Commission, and proposed 4 members at large. The CPC itself would be determined after if the ballot referendum is approved. So we don't have to go into the details of that at this time, but per the legislation, the Conservation Commission would be required.
So that the board that you're proposing here is going to be part of the referendum? Or is it by?
It's part of the language of the,
Of the
saying that.
statute?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And those 5 groups are statutorily required.
Yeah, okay.
And then you have an option of 4 to 4 at-large people.
The majority of communities overwhelmingly have added 4 members at large to their committees. So project requests submitted to the CPC for review. CPC accepted projects because they have to look to see if it actually is something that can be funded by CPA funds, or then forward to town meeting, and then town meeting reviews and approves the projects or the funding that's allocated towards those groups. So their towns have also been creative to say, instead of us reviewing individual projects, let's just put the money towards a fund, a trust fund that is for like I gave the example earlier, right? AIR used a conservation fund that was overseen by the Conservation Commission and managed by the town government. And then, that appropriation was then approved by town meeting. So in closing here, answering a lot of good questions. I don't know if you have any additional questions at this point. All right.
After you go through the different boards, what's the immediate next step for you guys?
Well, after different boards, we would synergize our thoughts on this and get ready for our presentation at town meeting.
Town meeting is the next one.
Should the selectmen desire to have this as a warrant article that they raise. If they do not raise it, then we will seek a citizen's petition to have it discussed at town meeting. We'll present on it and then let town meeting decide whether to move forward with putting the question on the ballot. And then obviously, presuming that is accepted, we will have a lot of work on our hands to get in front of the general public. We do have a public forum that's going to be publicized. We're landing on mid-March, details to follow on that.
And we have a website, communitypreservationshrewsbury.org, which has a lot of the same information. I would also like to recommend to you that there is another website called the communitypreservationcoalition.org, which covers everything in the state that has been done through the CPA. It's extremely detailed and very enlightening. You can drill down through every little project, how much it cost, how they put it together, pictures, everything. There's a lot of stuff there.
What was the Shrewsbury website? Community Preservation?
Communitypreservationshrewsbury.org.
And
No
it's actually listed
punctuation.
here on the last slide.
Oh.
Yeah, it should be on there.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so, but the Community Preservation Coalition website, you could spend hours just browsing in there. It's really entertaining.
I have a question. Sure. So this was enacted in 2000, and still more than half of Massachusetts communities haven't opted in. Do you have any idea why? 'Cause you said 176 towns and cities.
Yeah.
So that leaves about 190 left.
Right.
Yeah.
That have not.
It requires a little group of citizens to coalesce around the idea and just move it. Sometimes you have that, sometimes you don't. Sometimes the town is just overburdened by other things and they just may not be able to cope with it. I think Shrewsbury is definitely able to cope with this. If you look at the amount of money, we're asking from people, it's like 2 pizzas. It's not a big deal over the course of a year. I've often felt that we do so much more when we get together than we do when we're, as individuals. And I firmly believe in community action. This is grassroots. This is people coming together with a little idea they want for, maybe they want a dog park. This is always, we hear this a lot in trails. They're always asking why there's no dog park. And it can't be that hard. I think we can do this. I think there's a lot of interest out there with these projects. It's kind of a feel-good thing, it really is. I just really like to see it happen. You know, the pluses far outweigh the minuses of the tiny amount of expense that would cost the individual. But, you know, I'm going with whatever the town decides, but I'd really like to see it happen.
You know, just a thought, I mean, these are great examples that are put in here, but to me, the towns that are named or have opted into the CPA have far much more open space than we do as a town. So I don't know how analogous they are to Shrewsbury.
There seems to be, there's a lot of variation.
Well, I mean, Northborough, Harvard, Hudson, West Boylston, and Air have far much more open space than Shrewsbury and far smaller populations.
Well, also, I mean, Lowell was the most recent city that's adopted CPA. I would imagine they probably don't have that much open space. Boston has also approved it as well. So there will be examples across the board. And of course, remember, the CPA is not just only for open space. I know this is a Conservation Commission, but, you know, it covers more than just open space. So whether a community like Sturbridge, right, with a lot of the historic buildings, they've adopted CPA, I would imagine, because they have a lot of historic buildings, they want to preserve that, and there's also a draw for people to come to their community to consume that. So it depends on the community what they see the most gain from it. Whether it could be historic preservation, it could be affordable housing needs, it could be open space and recreation.
I believe that Cambridge spends a vast amount of their money on affordable housing, which sounds amazing.
They also have a much higher tax rate than Shrewsbury.
Well,
and a far larger population to pay for it.
Yes, like I said, there's a lot of variation out there. There's a lot of little towns too.
Yeah,
I mean,
no, I
Berlin,
don't
you know,
disagree.
I mean, gee.
And I, you know, one comment, and then I'll close mine up for the night. For the exemption issue, the median family income for Shrewsbury is $97,000 according to the HUD table for 2019. And you have, you know, low-income property owners. You know, my thought, for what it's worth, would be that if you're gonna provide an exemption, if this were to come to fruition and it was 1% and you were gonna provide an exemption, the exemption should match the real estate tax exemption. So veterans, low-income, elderly, that you would have to prove. And my only reasoning behind that is if this fund came to fruition in Shrewsbury, open space, affordable housing, and recreation and things like that, increase property values across the board for all homeowners.
Yeah.
So therefore, everybody should have to pay something unless you have a specific exemption like the real estate tax. It shouldn't just be low income and low to moderate income seniors. It should match the real estate tax base.
So if you're currently already existing exempted from property taxes, then there's nothing to tax.
Well, you have a low property tax. You're not exempted. No, everybody's paying.
Right. I think, in your example, you mentioned maybe a veteran, because we have a number of exclusions that town meeting has approved, right? There's a whole class of folks that are excluded.
Right.
If their property has already been deemed exempted, there's no charge to them anyway, because they have
Correct.
zero value.
Right, so
from
if they're
property tax.
paying, if they're exempted from real estate tax already, then yes, they should be exempted from this as well. But we shouldn't make a second class of people that would be exempted from this surcharge.
I'm sorry, just to clarify,
So
are you
if
suggesting that they
somebody's
should
currently
be charged?
If somebody's currently exempted from paying real estate tax, then
Right.
sure, they should be exempted from paying this additional 1%
Sure.
surcharge.
Okay.
But if they're not exempt from paying real estate tax, we shouldn't provide them an exemption for this.
So your advice, if I hear you correctly, is to not include these exemptions for low-income property and low to moderate income seniors?
If they're not receiving an exemption from real estate tax, no. I mean, they're gaining the benefit of open space. They're gaining the benefit from recreation. Their property value will increase because of those provisions in town. Why should they get an exemption from 1%? To your point, if it's only 2 pizzas,
Yeah.
why should they get an exemption?
We'll certainly take into consideration. I appreciate for that feedback. As we have additional listening sessions about where people, where their thoughts are around this. Again, we haven't, gone to the selectmen yet formally. We've approached them and they wanted us to get the feedback from the committees, commissions. So we can certainly take that back to them as well. See how they think about that. Okay.
Anybody else?
Thank you for your extended time.
I just want to thank you for your presentation. I'm still conflicted because, even though the expenditures for these causes, it's a very seductive proposal because we'd like more open space. We need historical presentation, all this. But as you know, I don't have to tell anybody here or you that there's a struggle every year as to what to fund in this community. Whether it be more firemen, more policemen, more teachers, more, and wouldn't all of those needs be helped by a 1% surcharge on a tax, on our property tax, or a 1% increase of property tax? So how do you justify one over the other? And I guess where I'm torn is that we already have a structure in this government that works quite well through the budget that requires approval by a host of committees and town meeting itself, so that if any of these needs are in fact judged to be necessary by the community, they should be funded through that way, as opposed to creating a whole separate pot of money that can be, that is directed to 3 or 4 unique needs. That's where I'm struggling, and why this has.
A lot of these things, you would typically take a second place seat to
Well,
the needs of schools and
If they take a
teachers,
second place seat in the
so,
community, that's
I mean-
their lot.
That's the community.
Well,
Yeah, that's what the community has decided. It's like 1 acre zoning,
so if there's no more open space in Shrewsbury, you're happy with that as an outcome to
No,
pass
I-
on to
no,
the next
No, I
generation?
voted for the,
I sorta,
I
There's
voted for the
There's very
override.
little at this point.
I
Anyway.
voted for the
There's
override.
more than you
right?
think.
And I paid for the
yeah,
override.
no, we did. We've
So-
got some nice little parcels
Yeah,
that
so-
we have, but then again, you don't wanna just say, well, that was it, and it's all done and over
Yeah.
with. I mean, you still wanna look forward
But
to,
because you want open space and I want teachers,
raise your taxes.
well, exactly, that's my point.
Raise your taxes for
You've
your
made my
teachers,
point.
and then use CPA to
No,
pay
no,
for
no,
the
no,
by
no,
open
no.
space.
You've just made my point.
No, I see
So-
some of the things that you're working to fund as always taking a low priority when it comes to making those hard choices on a budget. So, yeah, it's a struggle, but I
Yeah.
give you credit for.
Yeah, well, let me just say-
I appreciate the work you're doing, I really
As a,
do.
as a person from Trails, Trails has no budget.
Right.
Trails has a little bank account that the town set up, and it was by our own efforts, we have, I think, $993 in there that we got from donations from people and things like that. But we spend practically no money. And if we had a little tiny bit more money, we could, make footbridges and, all these little things that we'd love to have and that would make our trails so much more usable. There's this big plan that we'd like to connect to the neighboring towns, and it's uphill work. It's that kind of thing where, it's never going to get an override. But if you just need a little bit of money and a couple of devoted people to do this, you got a chance at it, and it would benefit the whole town in the long run. So that's where I'm coming from.
Appreciate it.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
When the language of your referendum becomes available, you'll distribute that when you come up with the actual language of.
Yes, that would be part of the town meeting
Yeah.
decision. Yeah.
On the website? It'll probably go on the CPA website.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Yes, well, I hope you continue your evening with great success.
So,
Okay, are we
up
ready
to me,
for our
right?
orders of conditions now, Bob?
I move that we issue an order of conditions for the,
First one is for
to
Market
Route
Basket.
20 Nominee Trust for the construction of 2 commercial buildings, stormwater management basins, parking lot areas, retaining walls, et cetera, at 100, 200, and 228 Hartford Turnpike.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on this, or are we pretty clean with the way it's been presented?
Standard conditions, I would say.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I further move, Mr. Chairman, that we, wait a minute, let me see here.
So we never actually, 25 Kingston Street still needs to be open,
Sure.
continue.
That's still open, right? So we want to go down to...
Chavero, the one on 198 South
Yes.
Quinsigamon.
I move that we issue an order of conditions for the removal of trees, demolition of existing single-family homes, and construction of new single-family home and retaining walls at 198 South Quinsigamon Avenue, with the conditions that the reconstruction of the wall at the river's edge, at the lake's edge, be done during the drawdown period, and that no building permits be issued until all of the walls, the construction of all of the walls are completed and stabilized.
All right, do we have a second?
And there was going to
Anything
be
else?
a double row of siltation.
And an additional row of siltation control.
Where?
Where above the,
Of the second,
above the
second
second
proposed wall.
yeah, on top of the walls, yeah.
So between the house and the wall?
Right.
Okay.
Anything else?
Yeah, well, the sewer and water lines were never shown,
But that'll be picked up with the building permit, right?
yeah, I would just, maybe it doesn't hurt to say that they have to be pursued through the building permit process. And,
Okay.
I also,
also a manual transfer switch.
Oh, yeah. Which already exists, right?
No, the,
well, it depends if they, yeah, if, well,
he doesn't know.
he doesn't know, it depends if they put a new house in, they don't know at this point, because they've not really designed it.
Chances are, if it's a new house, the electrical.
Yeah, it should be by, I think they could do it by gravity, but I'm not sure. I also had that the wall had to be laid out by, or they offered to have the wall laid out by land surveyor, so we make sure it doesn't move.
Yes.
Yep, and that the new walls
Well,
have
building.
railings.
Well,
that
that'll be the building, they'll need building permits.
Yeah, that'll be building code, so.
All right. The one thing I worry, when they're doing these wall reconstructions on the lake, the lowest one, not raising the elevation any, because now you start getting into taking flood storage away, like, it's easy to raise it another rock, it's another 6 inches, and then they put a little fill behind it, and all of a sudden you've lost compensatory storage. You know what I'm saying? Not compensatory, but you've lost flood storage. So if there's some way to say that any reconstruction of the wall be done no higher than existing wall height, so that as they're doing it, they're not,
Yeah, I think they had grades on the wall, but we can,
if they have the grades, that's
yeah, and then
perfect.
when they give us the as-built, they'll have to put the top of walls.
I think he said he was gonna pin the ends or something, just to show.
Yeah, who's gonna stake it so it doesn't
Yeah,
creep
but
forward.
that's gonna not take care of the elevation, that's gonna take care of the, the
Okay, we can,
intrusion, but, okay, anything else on this one?
We need a vote.
Yep, we need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I further move, Mr. Chairman, that we issue an order of conditions for the demolition and reconstruction of a single-family residence at 246A South Quinsigamon Ave, provided that they provide a manual transfer switch on the ejector system. And if the foundation is going to be replaced, that all of the excavates be removed from the site.
Yep. That it?
Do we have to specify about the tree removal?
The oak tree, only one.
it's shown on the plan, so it should, as long as we
Shown on the
reference,
plan.
as long as we reference the current plans, we should be set.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. That's it.
Yeah,
The
we
RDA.
did the RDA.
RDA, yep,
We did that.
Bumblebee, yep.
Yeah.
Nothing for sale.
Do we have a certificate of compliance to Andy, South Street?
Yep, 409 South Street.
That's okay.
Yep, 409 South Street and 779, 787. Just take that thing. And then technically 25 Kingston Street, we still haven't continued that, because obviously no one's turning up,
Yes.
so.
Do we have any news on 794 Grafton Street? There's some
The enforcement, yeah,
All right, so I'll start from the beginning here. So I brought you
Thank you
some
for waiting.
pictures. Oh, don't worry about it. And, so you can see what, you can open up and see what it's, the whole situation is.
just tell the public what we're doing. We're now discussing 784 Grafton Street,
Right,
and this is an existing enforcement order.
right. So this is what the house looked like, right here. You open this up, and this is from Shrewsbury. That's what it looked like when it was for sale, right there.
That's the house
Yeah,
right
the
there.
pool, yeah, right here. Okay. This is another one from Zillow when they listed it.
Yep.
And here's a side angle of Zillow, all this is listed in this property. And then here's again Google Map, it shows you what it looks like with the round pools.
Which one is your house? Where's your?
I'm over here,
Oh, all right, okay.
all right, so when you keep going on, so this is again more of what it looked like when it was being listed to sell.
Yeah,
This was
this is-
after it sold.
Yeah, this is when we saw it.
Right. It continues to be after it's sold. This
Okay.
is continuing to today.
When was this? This is 11?
18.
Okay, so that was a year ago.
Like a year.
Yeah, because it was, I didn't remember all of that.
Right, from
at
for
that point.
sale to,
Yeah.
which was in 18. And that's how much they've done.
Go back to that next one down. That's when we were there, yeah.
That's the back end of it. This side is where you probably didn't miss. That's the side.
Yeah, I didn't see that,
And
that
this is the
part.
back end where
Yep.
it's all wetlands
Yep,
and they stored
that's
it
the
all in
part.
there. So this, they're adding all kinds of pavers, because if you look at this, they added the door and all that. If you go on to that page, I don't know if you guys, here's the door when they were
Jason's
selling
also-
it.
Yeah.
And then this is what they've done, and they
Oh, yeah,
add all
yeah.
kinds of pavers. Well, the pavers continue, and they continue on, and they're going right down, you can see here where they started putting together that
That's the shed.
shed.
Yeah.
The pavers go right down, I think you can even see in that picture a pile of them right there. And they kind of grade
I mean,
down
this is,
the
they're working
surface.
on the pavers in the
Go-
past couple months, I mean, they were there.
Yeah, they continue, they always are working on pavers. It continues on and on. Here's the shed, the walls are up, as you saw, I think you were there when the walls have been up.
Mm-hmm.
This was them working on it. And this is within the wetlands, that shed, because you can see, here's the wetlands, here's the rest of that little
Yeah.
red.
Well, the outcome from having the wetland flag was the shed turned out not to be in the wetland, but very close. It was like 6 feet.
Yeah,
Right,
it's
I
not
believe it
100
was about
feet.
6
Yeah, so it
feet
wasn't in it, but
off
it
of
was close to it.
It was
It was
close.
very much in it.
Yeah, on the corner was about 6 feet away.
So what they're doing now, and this is the problem I'm having now, is that they're continuing to just pave all the way down. They're just
Along your property
all-
line,
Well,
close to it.
all, no, from their house over,
Yeah.
over, and
And
right
this
into
is-
the wetlands.
and this
They're
is-
gonna keep going
and
right
this is
into it.
you.
This is me. So they've already
Yeah.
done all of this,
Yeah, yeah.
all of this, and where the shed is, they've gotten to the shed. So it's all paved, all the way down, all around the pool. So what's happening if you, when I look at it, is
Yeah.
that they are expanding the impervious, the water. So they're changing all the water, so now I've got wetlands coming and going. I don't know if that's a way to try to stop the wetlands or go underneath the wetlands, but the pavers, if you go by their house right now, they have piles and piles and piles of pavers within those big crates that you drop off on pallets. These 6 of them, pallets.
There were no pavers when we went out
No,
by
but
the
right
pool,
now-
and now they're saying.
Brad went out there fairly recently. He didn't say there was anything like that out there.
Why
so.
don't we
We can take another look. I mean, it's already,
Right
Go
now, the
another-
snow is piled up against these things of pavers.
So,
And they
so,
continue, and all these pavers are already here, they're already all the way down to the shed. And all along the pool. They're all, I don't know if it's a weight, I don't know how you
Are there
get
flags?
it around.
yeah, we had it flagged. There's already an enforcement order on the property, but,
Right.
at this point,
This one, they're just putting pavers
if
in.
they continue to do work as they want, there's not much
And they continue to have it within the way it looks, with all the debris and all that still everywhere. It has not ever been picked up. So it's within the wetlands, the debris definitely. And they pile it in there and leave it.
That was
and
a
then
pretty
they-
clean site, huh, back at this time period?
Right, that's-
When was that taken?
That was from that was a year ago when they were selling it. That's their car.
That's
that
just prior
previous
to them,
owners.
yeah.
Right. That never looked like it looks today.
It's only
That's
been
why I
a year,
brought
that
this
they've
in.
only been there for a year?
Yes. Well, no, now it's going into year 2 because it's 2020. But they've done that. What I showed you was done in
Yeah,
1 year. They
yes.
put all that there. What they were doing is bringing stuff in, and that's when, and they were dumping it within the wetlands. They were trying to say, no, it's construction from the house, but when the building inspector went to look at it, she's like, that's not from this house, that's from another building. You
That's,
need to
we were
clean it
down
up.
a little, we didn't
Right.
get to that point, but still.
Right, they added all that, but they're continuing down into the wetlands. And they have a lot of those pavers already down. But now they have the pallets that
When
you
we were
bring
out
in.
there, it looked pretty much like that. I mean,
It was all lawn, the pool was there, that was it. as I
Right.
recall.
yeah, I mean, and the canoe was there, and there was
Yeah.
some other junk laying
That
around,
was-
but
Yep.
that
Now-
was from a totally clean site.
Right,
wow.
right, that's why when, I remember him saying it was a mess and this and that, I'm like, and I got this off your website, so I was like, I mean, I think there's a little difference of opinion there. But right here where the cars are parked, that's where you'll see the pallets. You don't have to go any, you just drive by, pallets and pallets of pavers. Now there's 6 that you get, you need a bobcat or backhoe or something to lift off of a truck, and it's not a food, it's on somebody, it's just on the sidewalk. So it's very, upsetting, because all this water
of
is now
course it is.
changing directions, and as they continue to not clean it up, I'm not sure why that is. But it's, I've never met someone that takes a site that looks like that and then
Makes a mess.
completely ruins it. I mean, that kind of an investment, that to me is crazy, but that's what's happening.
Okay, we'll take a ride down
Okay.
and see what's going on with the paving.
Yeah, because that's the thing, I don't want any more
Yeah.
wetlands.
Thank you.
Okay.
No, thanks.
Did you want to keep these?
Well, we keep one, I
Keep
think.
one, okay.
Be nice to keep one, right?
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
We'll keep them with us.
Okay, all right, I appreciate it.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. Going back to the meetings and hearings, we opened, one, which was the continued public hearing regarding the notice of intent filed by Volpini Real Estate LLC for the construction of a house, well, and
Oh, yeah.
septic system at 25 Kingston Street. No one showed tonight, so we will keep that hearing open until our next meeting, which is February 18th. Is there anything else that we have tonight? Bylaw discussion, Brad's not around, so why don't we,
Yeah, we don't have anything right now to present, we're working on something we can hopefully present.
so that does anything? That's all we
That's
got.
all I got.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.